They told him to get on the mat, so he did. No belt, no gear, work clothes. The crowd was already laughing before it started. The black belt threw everything he had, every punch, every kick, every combination that had won him trophies in 3 counties. Nothing landed, 6 minutes, not one mark on him. Then the black belt charged one last time, one move, 1 second. 200 pounds hit the floor like a thunderclap. The people stopped breathing at the exact same moment, and into that silence, through that door, walked the most respected martial artist in the state of Georgia. He looked at the man in the work clothes, and he bowed. Nobody noticed him. That was the point. 6 nights a week, Darnell Webb pushed through the back door of Apex Fighting Academy at 6 in the evening and disappeared into the work. Mop. Bucket. Disinfectant. The particular rhythm of a man who had learned to take up exactly as much space as this job required, and not 1 inch hiss more. He was 42 years old, broad shoulders that carried nothing but cleaning supplies, eyes that stayed down, footsteps that no sound on hardwood floors. The gym smelled like sweat and rubber mats, and the lemon disinfectant he used on the mirrors. Championship nurse hung from the ceiling. Trophies lined the front window. The parking lot outside held SUVs and luxury sedans that cost more than his annual salary. And the people who drove them walked past Darnell like he was part of the building, which, to them, he was. He earned $11.80 an hour. No benefits, no sick days. Half of every paycheck left his account on Friday mornings, transferred automatically to Clearwater Care Home in Decatur, where his mother Eleanor had lived for the past 3 years. Early onset dementia, the cruelest version, because it took the person's while the body was still strong, while the face still looked exactly like the face you loved. Sometimes the math didn't work out cleanly. Those weeks, Darnell ate instant noodles and black coffee and did not mention it to anyone. There was no one to mention it to. He had a studio apartment 12 minutes from the gym, a mattress on the floor, a single chair at a kitchen table with 1 leg shorter than the others. 1 photograph of his mother on the windowsill, taken before the illness, when she still laughed easily. She was at a cookout in the backyard of the house he'd grown up in, head tilted back, completely unguarded. He kept that photograph facing the wall on bad nights. There were a lot of bad nights. But here is the thing about Darnell Webb that nobody at Apex Fighting Academy knew. The thing nobody asked about. Because when you see a man with a mop, you think you already understand his whole story. You don't. 8 years. United States Marine Corps. 2 combat deployments, both domestic crisis response assignments that took him to places most people had never heard of. He came back each time quieter than before, more careful with his words, more precise with everything. And somewhere in those 8 years, under the instruction of a man named Eldon Price, Darnell trained, not as a hobby, not casual. He trained the way people train when a mentor sees something in them and refuses to let it go to waste. Price had spotted Darnell at a base gym in 2008, watched him move through a basic drill with the economy of someone who understood, instinctively, that power had nothing to do with force. He'd pulled Darnell aside afterward. "You've got something," Price had said. Not as a compliment, as a fact requiring action. "I want to work with it." 4 years they trained together. Early mornings, late nights. The kind of sessions that pushed past the point where the body said stop and revealed what lived on the other side. By the time Price retired from military consulting and opened Apex Academy in Atlanta, Darnell had earned his 5th-degree black belt in Price's mixed combat system. He was the best student Price had ever trained. He never told anyone because of 2016 Fort Bragg. A Tuesday night in November. Darnell heard sounds from the barracks storage room that weren't right. The kind that make the chest go cold before the brain has finished processing what the ears are reporting. He went in. 2 senior enlisted men. 1 junior soldier on the ground. What was happening was deliberate and ugly and had clearly been happening for weeks. Darnell topped it. He used what Price had taught him. He used only what the situation required. But required turned out to be enough to put both men in the infirmary for 4 days. The record was sealed. The junior soldier, a young sergeant named Troy Dillard, had requested it himself. He wanted no public record of what had been done to him, no permanent documentation that followed his career. Darnell understood. He signed the paperwork without argument, but he carried what happened after. Not the act itself, not the mechanics of what his hands had done in that room. He carried the speed of it, the way training had taken over before he'd finished making a conscious choice. How little effort it required. 2 large men, and Darnell had barely elevated his heart rate. That scared him more than anything that came before or after. So when the service ended, when the paperwork was signed and he was a civilian again, with a mother who needed care and a bank account that said he needed work, he chose the mop. Not because he'd failed at anything, because he didn't trust himself. Every time he felt his hands remember what they knew, he thought about that storage room, about how fast it happened, about what he might do if someone pushed him far enough and he failed to stop in time. The mop was safe. The mop asked nothing of him except that he show up. So he showed up, 6 nights a week, for 7 years. Apex Fighting Academy occupied the end unit of a strip mall on the north side of Atlanta. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished floors. The kind of place that photographed well and attracted parents willing to pay $400 a month for their children to instill the discipline in an air-conditioned room. Coach Eldon Price had built it from nothing. 23 years of teaching, state titles, regional champions. That meant something in this part of the country. He had hired Darnell 7 years ago without advertising the position, showed up at Darnell's apartment one Saturday morning and made a simple offer. I need someone reliable. The hours are bad and the pay isn't great, but it's steady. Darnell looked at him. Does it matter that I know you? Darnell said, It matters that I know you, Price said. Take the job. They never discussed the training. Never discussed what Darnell was or what he could do. Price understood. The way people who have spent enough years around warriors understand that some men need to lay their weapons down for a while. He handed Darnell a set of keys, walked him through the closing routine, and didn't make it strange. That was 7 years ago. Price spent most of his time on the regional tournament circuit these days, coaching competitors, training fighters in other cities. The day-to-day operation of Apex fell to the staff, which meant, in practice, it fell to whoever filled the room with the most noise. Ryan Holt was very good at making noise. Ryan Holt was 28 years old, 6'1", 195-pound protein shakes, and inherited certainty. He had his father's jaw, and his father's eyes, and his father's habit of reading every room like a space he already owned. 2nd-degree black belt. 5 training days a week. Enough tournament wins to believe he was exceptional rather than well-resourced. His father, Douglas Holt, had made his money in commercial real estate. 4 office complexes across metro Atlanta. A lake house in Tennessee. A name that opened doors in this part of the city without knocking. Over 5 years, Douglas had donated generously to Apex. New mats, equipment upgrades, a renovated locker room with a brass nameplate on the wall, donated by the Holt family. Everyone at Apex understood what that nameplate meant. Ryan understood it best. He walked through the gym like he owned it. Technically, his family nearly did. But underneath the confidence, something brittle lived. Douglas Holt was not an easy man to impress. He had built his business through relentless pressure and expectations he applied to his sons with the same absence of gentleness. 3 years ago, after Ryan's regional tournament win, Douglas had looked across the dinner table, said something Ryan had never managed to forget. You have every advantage, and you're still not the best. Not congratulations, not acknowledgement, just that. Ryan had nodded, said nothing, gone home, trained harder. But the sentence didn't respond to training. It sat in his chest, sharp-edged and permanent, and Ryan found ways to manage the feeling it produced. He found someone he could be superior to without any effort at all. He found Darnell. The first time, it was almost casual. Tuesday evening. Ryan was running an advanced sparring session, 8 students on the mat, drilling combinations. Darnell was in the back hallway restocking bathroom supplies, moving quietly the way he always moved. Ryan stopped the drill. "Hold on." He walked off the mat and stuck his head around the corner. "Hey, clean guy, come here." Darnell straightened slowly. "You need..." Brown got a sparring helmet from his shelf and held out. "Put this on. We need a body for drills." "I'm working," Darnell said. "You're working for us." Ryan's voice dropped. Not quite threatening. "Close enough. My dad pays your check. When I need a body mat, you're a body on the mat." 8 students since on the other side of the doorway, pretending not to listen. Darnell looked at Ryan. His expression didn't change. He set the helmet back on the shelf. "I'll pass," he said, and went back to the paper towels. Ryan stood there 3 seconds, jaw tight. Then he turned, walked back to the mat, and threw a kicking pad hard down the hallway without looking. It hit Darnell's mop bucket with a sharp crack that echoed through the building. "Clean that up too," Ryan called. Some students laughed, not all of them. "Enough." Darnell picked up the pad, set it neatly against the wall, kept working. He did not allow himself to go to the place his mind wanted to go. He breathed, slow and deliberate. The settling techniques Price had drilled into him years ago, for moments when the instincts were firing and the choice was whether to act or to wait. He waited. He mopped the floor. He went home. The second incident happened Thursday. Ryan was in the main training hall with 3 of his regular training partners. Darnell was on the far side of the room, working the stretch of floor near the mirror wall. Ryan glanced at him, then picked up his phone. He recorded for 90 seconds. Darnell's back was mostly turned, mop moving in steady arcs. Head down, the gray polo, the black work pants, the kind of man who disappears in the background of a room so completely that you stop wondering about him. Ryan posted the clip that evening. Captious. "Our janitor genuinely believes he works at a fighting gym. Bro, you are the gym entertainment." Laughing emojis. 200 likes within the hour. The comments were the expected kind. Easy jokes from people who had never considered that the man holding the mop might have an entire life they knew nothing about. Darnell saw it that night, sitting on his apartment floor, eating cold leftover rice from a plastic container. He stared at the screen. Then he put the phone face down and finished his meal. He didn't report it. There was no reporting structure that would have made a difference. Lorraine Osei, who managed the gym's scheduling and finances, was fair-minded and organized and completely without leverage when it came to Ryan Holt. Everyone understood the arrangement. The Holt money was load-bearing. You didn't challenge it, so Darnell didn't. He went back to work the next evening and the evening after, and he did not allow himself to look at Ryan Holt longer than the job required. The third incident was a Wednesday. Darnell kept his clinical supplies in a storage closet near the back entrance. He kept everything organized, mop heads by size, disinfectant bottles upright, trash tags on the left shelf, rubber gloves beside them. Military habit applied to civilian life. A place for everything. He opened the closet at 6:15 and it was empty. Not moved, not shuffled. Empty. He checked the hallway, the bathroom, the secondary storage area near the break room. 20 minutes, nothing. He found his supplies in the dumpster behind the building. Mop head soaked in old protein shake. Rubber gloves cut into strips. A note taped to the bag in black marker. "Where your stuff belongs." Darnell stood at the dumpster for a moment. Warm evening air. Traffic moving at the end of the lot. The sound of drills running on inside, someone counting repetitions, the rhythm of a session in progress. He pulled everything out, washed what could be salvaged, drove to the hardware store, and spent $17 he didn't have on replacements. He did not report it. Reporting to Lorraine meant Lorraine had to choose between him and the Holt money. He already knew how that calculation ended. He had seen it play out in other places, with other people, in every situation where one person's discomfort was simply less expensive than the alternative. He was the cheaper option. He always had been. He went home. He ate. He slept. The fourth incident was a Friday. Darnell used his 15-minute break to eat the sandwich he'd brought from home. Small table in the corner of the break room. The room smelled like microwave popcorn and energy drinks. Two junior students were at the other table, talking about an upcoming tournament. They nodded at Darnell when he came in. He nodded back. Ryan appeared in the doorway 2 minutes later. He leaned against the frame, looked at Darnell, then at the two students with the expression of someone preparing a performance. "Y'all eating in here with him?" said casually, like a reasonable observation. The tone of someone confused rather than deliberate. "It smells like floor cleaner," Ryan continued. "Can't even taste my food." One student picked up his plate and left. 30 seconds later, the other followed. Ryan watched them go. Then he looked at Darnell with something cooler than a smile. Something that had already decided how the interaction ended before it started. "See?" he said. "Nobody wants to sit with the cleaning guy. Take a hint." He left. Darnell sat at the empty table with the rest of his sandwich. He looked at the wall across from him, chewed slowly. He thought about his mother. About Eleanor Webb at 58, the cruelest version of the disease because it arrived while the body was still strong, while the face still looked exactly like the person you loved. He thought about her at Clearwater, with the photographs he'd brought to help her remember. The nurses who were kind but busy. He thought about $495 due in 9 days. He thought about the $287 in his checking account. He finished his sandwich. He went back to work. The fifth incident was different. Not because Ryan said anything worse. Because of what happened inside Darnell's body when it happened. Monday evening. Darnell had just finished mopping the full length of the main training hall. Clean floor. The kind of clean that requires getting into the corners, working the strip along the mirror wall where the matte edge meets the wood. He had done it right. He always did it right. Ryan came out of the locker room in his close white gi, belt loose after practice. He walked directly across the floor Darnell had just finished, not around it, straight through the center, heel to toe, leaving a trail of footprints from one end to the other. Stopped at the water fountain, didn't look back. "Missed a spot," he said, that was all. Except something happened in Darnell's chest. Not anger, something older than anger, a shift. The way a lock opens when the right key turns all the way. His hands tightened on the mop handle. His shoulders moved, just slightly, back and down. The posture price had drilled into him until it was pure reflex. Weight redistributing. Feet finding distance. His breathing changed. Shorter, controlled. The pattern the body falls into so when threat assessment is complete and action is imminent. Combat breathing. He had not breathed like that since Fort Bragg. He caught it, the way you catch something falling, before it hits the floor, before the thinking mind has arrived, purely because the body knows its own habits. He felt the shift happening, and he stopped it, loosened his grip, let his shoulders drop, brought his weight back to neutral, and he started mopping. He went over Ryan's footprints, slowly, the same way he would have done it if no one had made them. But his hands were shaking, not from fear. From restraint, from the effort of choosing again. The version of himself that didn't act. He finished the floor. Went home and sat in his kitchen looking at his hands for a long time. The new student noticed first. Becca Strand, a member of Apex, for 3 weeks. 24 years old. She worked as a freelance camera operator, corporate events mostly. The kind of work that required her to be invisible while paying close attention to everything. She had joined the beginner self-defense class on a friend's recommendation and had spent those 3 weeks growing increasingly uncomfortable with what she was watching. She saw Ryan's video post. She watched the other students laugh or look away, which was its own kind of answer. She noticed how Darnell moved through the gym every evening like a man practicing the art of taking up as little space as possible, and she recognized that behavior from the inside. But the towel changed things. Ryan was finishing a sparring session on a Friday. Loose after a good round, kind of mood that poor for the room. He grabbed a hand towel from the rack near the mat and threw it. Not at anyone specific, just threw it. toward Darnell, who was 10 feet away adjusting the equipment rack. Darnell's left hand came up. One motion. Clean. The towel snapped in his palm and stayed there. He hadn't turned his head. His eyes were still on the crack, body still angled away from Ryan's position. He'd caught it on pure peripheral reflex, without looking, without flinching, without any visible reaction at all. Then, half a second later, he turned it into nothing. Let his hand drop naturally, set the towel on the rack as if he'd meant to pick it up anyway. Kept working. Becca stood very still. She had spent several years behind a camera learning how human bodies moved. She understood timing and reflex and the physics of reaction. What she had just watched was not the response of someone who happened to be quick. That was trained response. The kind that lives in the nervous system, not the thinking mind. The kind built through years of very specific repetition. She had seen it once before at a law enforcement training facility, watching instructors demonstrate techniques. The way their bodies moved before their minds had finished deciding to move. Darnell moved like that. She said nothing. Not then. But she started paying attention the way she paid attention through a lens, waiting for the moment that revealed what the setup was really about. She had a feeling that moment was coming. Ryan found out about Darnell's office on a Saturday afternoon. He'd seen Darnell's last name on the employee roster and typed it into a search engine on impulse, not looking for anything particular. 3 clicks. United States Marine Corps. 8 years. Honorable discharge. Right under the screen. Something moved across his face. Not quite respect. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that Darnell was not simply someone who had always held a mop, that there was a before. Years that point somewhere else entirely. That feeling lasted about 4 seconds. Then Ryan decided to use it. Monday morning, full class. Students stretching, warming up, checking phones. Ryan waited for the noise to settle. Hey, he said. Did anyone know our janitor was in the military? Like he was sharing a fun fact. 8 years, Ryan continued, pacing the mat, working the room, and he ended up cleaning our floors. He spread his hands. That's wild, right? You serve, you come home, and this is where you land. A few students shifted. Plus, someone managed a small laugh. 2 others looked at the floor. Becca in the back row studied her hands. I mean, what happened? Ryan said. He's a service broke, or there wasn't much there to begin with. Darnell was in the hallway. He heard every word. Has mop stopped moving? 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then it started again. He did not look toward the doorway, did not let himself imagine how his hands might answer what his voice could not. He mopped the hallway. He moved to the next section. He breathed. Later that week, Ryan gathered the senior students after class. He stood in the center of the mat, grinning with the energy of someone who has thought of something and wants credit for thinking of it. Saturday, he said. Open mat. Invite your people. Tyler, one of the longer-tenured students, waited. Darnell gets on the mat, Ryan said. Tyler frowned. He's not going to agree to that. He works here, Ryan said. Not angry, just certain. He shows up when the gym is open. We tell him we need him on the mat. Simple. That's not how it works, Tyler said. Ryan looked at him for a moment. It's how it works here, he said. He pulled out his phone and started the group chat. Saturday, open mat, bring everyone. He typed the next line and smiled as he sent it. Darnell versus Ryan. Janitor gets a lesson. The emojis came fast. Fire, laughing. The chat filled in under a minute. 30-something people made plans. Someone asked if they should bring snacks. Darnell found out Thursday evening. Getting into his car after his shift, keys in hand, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was a screenshot. The group chat. His name. The line about a lesson. He read it twice. Sat in the car for 15 minutes with the engine off. His first thought was not what you'd expect. Not anger. Not fear. Something more complicated. Something that had been building for weeks, for months, maybe for the full 7 years since he'd walked through Apex's back door and begun the project of making himself small. Somewhere underneath all that quiet, something had been waiting. He didn't name it yet. He took a breath, started the car, drove home without music. At his kitchen's table, he sat for a long time. The photograph of his mother faced outward on the windowsill. It was 52 in the photo, at the cookout, head tilted back, laughing at something someone said, the Eleanor he'd had before. He looked at her for a while, then he opened his phone. He typed to Becca Strand. Brief, Saturday. Ryan is planning something on the mat. I need someone I trust to film it. Full duration, no cuts. He sent it. Then he scrolled to another name, Calvin Shaw, attorney, former Marine, the kind of man who answered when it mattered. Darnell called. Calvin picked up on the second ring. It's late, Calvin said, already alert. I know, Darnell said. 2 minutes, he explained it. In short, the gym. Ryan, Saturday, the setup. What would happen if he went? What would happen if he didn't? Calvin was quiet a moment. Then don't throw first. Don't say anything threatening. Don't lose your head. I know, Darnell said. The second it's over, Calvin said. You call me, I know. I mean the second it's over, Darnell. I know, Calvin. A pause. You sure about this? Calvin said. Darnell looked at the photograph on the windowsill. No, he said, but I'm done running from it. Calvin exhaled slowly. All right, I'll be ready. Darnell hung up. He sat at the table another hour, not thinking. Exactly. More like settling. Sickest to saving sickest else the mark of glass before you decide if the water is clear. Around midnight he stood, moved to the narrow strip of space between his kitchen and the living room. Shoes off, feet bare on the linoleum. He started moving, no one watching, no mirrors, no audience. Just the muscles memory of 2 decades of work that had never actually left, no matter how many years he'd spent trying to leave it behind. He moved slowly at first, then faster, then with the full weight of everything he'd been told he couldn't use. Everything he'd folded up and put in a drawer and pretended he'd forgotten. He moved until the shakes in his hands stopped, until they were still. He stopped, stood, breathed. Outside, Atlanta did what cities do past midnight, moving and humming and ignoring the lives happening inside its walls. A car passed. A door closed somewhere. The refrigerator made its sound. Darnell stood in the quiet. He was ready. He didn't know yet if that was a good thing. But ready was what he had. And this time, he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Friday night, one day before Saturday. Darnell sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open. The cursor blinked inside a text field. Subject line. Notice of resignation. 2 sentences in the body. Polite. Clean. The kind of letter that closed a door without slamming it. He'd written it in under 3 minutes. He sat looking at it for 40. The apartment was quiet, the way only small apartments get quiet late at night. The refrigerator. The traffic 3 floors below. Occasional footsteps from whoever lived above him, a woman he'd seen twice once in the hallway and never spoken to. The world doing its business while Darnell sat very still and stared at 2 sentences that could end this before Saturday ever arrived. Walk away. Find another building. Another set of floors that needed mopping by someone willing to show up at 6 and stay until midnight. Atlanta had thousands of them. He could disappear from Apex so completely that within a week he'd be a story Ryan told at bars. The janitor who quit after getting called out. And Ryan would win. Not the fight. Darnell wasn't thinking about the fight. Ryan would win the longer thing. The thing underneath the fight. 7 years of being walked through, recorded. Had things thrown at him. Pushed out of rooms. All of it would end with Darnell Webb choosing the door. He would know that. That was the part that sat wrong. Not what Ryan would think. Not what anyone would think. What Darnell would carry forward. The weight of having disappeared one more time when it cost him something not to. His phone rang. Clearwater Care Home. He answered. Hey, baby. His mother's voice. Thin but steady. The evening calls came maybe twice a week now, during the clear stretches, when Sheets remembered the number and felt like reaching out. Some weeks there were no calls at all. This was the first one this week. Hey, Mama, he said. He closed the laptop. How was your day? She asked. Long, he said. How are you feeling? Oh, you know, she said, which was what she said when she didn't have the answer but didn't want him worrying. I watched television. They had that cooking show on. The one with the tall man who yells. Did you eat? Patricia brought me extra pudding at dinner, he said. These good people. They talked for a few minutes about small things. The bird that had been visiting her window ledge all week. A woman down the hall who had a laugh you could hear through two closed doors. The way the evening light came in at a certain angle this time of year and made the room look different than it did in the morning. Then she paused. The quality of the voice changed. "Baby," she said, "you're thinking about something." He didn't answer right away. "I know how you go quiet," she said. "That's not the regular quiet. That's the kind you do when you're sitting with a decision." He leaned back in the chair, looked at the ceiling. "There's a situation at work," he said finally. "I've been thinking about walking away from it." A pause on her end. "Are you in danger?" she asked. "No," he said, honestly. "Not the way you mean." "Then what kind of danger?" He didn't answer that exactly. The kind where, if I stay, something happens, and I don't know how it ends. She was quiet a moment. He could hear her breathing, steady and slow. "Is it about your pride?" she asked, almost a smile. Even now, even through everything the disease had taken, she could still find the line. "Maybe," he said. "Your pride is allowed to matter," she said. "Don't let anybody tell you it isn't." A breath. "But I know you, Darnell. I know what it looks like when you're talking yourself into leaving. You've done it before. You dress it up in smart language, makes it sound like the reasonable choice." Her voice was gentle, not accusing, just true. Sometimes the reasonable choice and the right choice aren't the same thing. He sat with that. "Go to sleep, Mama," he said quietly. "You too," she said. And Darnell, "Yeah, don't disappear from this one." He hung up, sat in the kitchen for a long time after. Then he opened the laptop, highlighted both sentences of the resignation letter, deleted them, closed opened his messages instead. To Becca Strand, still on for tomorrow. Full video, start to finish. Calvin Shaw, "I'm going through with it." Calvin responded in under a minute. 3 words, "I'll be ready." Darnell set the phone down, went to bed, didn't sleep easily. But when he finally did, it was the deep, still kind. The kind that comes after a decision is made and there's nothing left to argue with yourself about. Saturday morning arrived without ceremony. Darnell was up at 7, made coffee, sat by the window while Atlanta moved through its Saturday rhythms below. Delivery trucks, a woman walking a dog too large for the leash she'd chosen, 2 kids on bikes cutting through the parking lot of the closed hardware store across the street. He was not nervous. That surprised him a little. He'd expected some version of it. The biological alarm system, the chest tightening, the particular awareness of the body under threat. But there was nothing like that. What sat in his chest instead was closer to clarity. The flat, bright morning when the hard thinking is done and what remains is easier the doing. He thought about what Price had said once, at the end of a session that had gone long. Both of them sweating through their clothes, the training room hot and poorly ventilated. "The fight is never the hard part," Price had said. The hard part is deciding who you're going to be in it. You make that decision now. When it's quiet, when nothing is on the line, and then you just hold on to it when the noise starts. Darnell had held on to a lot of things over the years. This was one more. At 9, he drove to Apex. Becca's rust-dented blue hatchback was already in the lot. He knocked on the passenger window. She unlocked it without looking up from her phone. He sat in the passenger seat. It was a small car he adjusted to fit. "I need to ask you something," he said. "I figured," she said. "Today. Whatever Ryan has set up." He kept his voice level. "I need someone filming who isn't looking for the most dramatic angle." She waited. "Full picture," so he said. "Everything before I step on the mat. Everything during, everything after. Wide enough that if someone tries to tell a different version later, the footage says otherwise." Becca looked through the windshield at the parking lot. A pigeon was investigating something near the dumpster with the focused dedication of a professional. "The towel," she said. He didn't answer. "I know what I saw," she said simply, not asking him to explain it, just letting him know she understood why the footage mattered. Anachi looked at him. "Back corner, nothing cropped." He nodded, got out of the car. He had 4 hours. He spent them doing ordinary things. He ate. He drank water. He sat by his apartment window and watched the street. He did not look at his phone more than necessary. He did not rehearse what he would say because he didn't plan to say much. At 1:45, he put on his gray polo, his black work pants, his shoes, not gym clothes, not a gi, not anything that announced what he was. He went as himself. The parking lot told the story before he reached the door. Normally, a Saturday afternoon at Apex meant 12, maybe 15 cars. Today, there were over 30. People he didn't recognize, not just members but friends of members. People who'd seen the group chat and shown up for the show. Several had phones out already, filming the exterior before anything had started. Dartel parked at the edge of the lot. He sat in the car for 60 seconds, got out. Inside, the main training hall was packed 3 people deep around the mat perimeter. The energy had that particular quality of a crowd assembled to watch something happen to someone else. Phones already up, the room buzzing with the low, ugly excitement of people who have decided they're the audience rather than participants in what's about to occur. Ryan was at the center of the mat. Fresh gi, white and unwrinkled. Belt reti weist for the camera. He was bouncing on his toes, rolling his neck, shadow-boxing the air with the casual confidence of a man who had already written the ending and was simply waiting for the rest of the story to catch up. His 2 regular train partners stood at the mat's edge, watching him like a warm-up act watching the headliner. It started soft. Then others joined. Darnell, not a greeting, a summons. He walked in through the back at 2:15. Gray polo, black work pants. He looked, entirely and without performance, like a man who had come to check on a plumbing issue and was mildly confused about the crowd. The room recalibrated when it saw him. Not silence, yet. Something before silence. The adjustment of a crowd that had been anticipating a version of this moment and was now encountering Yalu Alibaba of the actual Sensei. He was larger than people remembered, or perhaps he simply seemed larger now that they were genuinely looking. Ryan spotted his and spread his arms wide. There he is, Ryan said. The main event. Laughter, a whistle, phone flashes going off like small appliances. Come on, Darnell. Ryan waved him forward with someone's on holding all the cards. Oh, don't be shy. I'll go easy. 60%, maybe 40. Darnell stopped at the edge of the mat. I'm here to set up chairs for the youth class, he said. Flat. Even. Not performing anything in either direction. The laughter changed quality. Ryan's grin held, but something behind his eyes didn't quite follow it. Chairs can wait, he said. His voice dropped. Bounce, wait. Balin, get on the mat. He let the next part land slowly. Or I call my dad today, and we have a conversation about your employment situation. The room went quiet. Not bored quiet. The quiet of 30-some people who understood exactly what had just said and were waiting to see what cost. Darnell stood still. He looked around the room slowly, not performing the looking. Just looking. Tyler near the left wall, arms folded, expression flat. A handful of beginners from the Saturday morning class who'd stayed, looking less certain about what they'd agreed to witness. Lorraine Osei standing near the back entrance, clipboard in hand, jaw tight, and in the far right corner. Becca, phone steady, angle wide. Just like she said, Darnell stepped onto the mat. The room erupted. Clapping. Somebody hooting. A voice calling something he didn't catch over the noise. Ryan raised both hands like a fighter entering an arena, and the crowd responded the way Ryan had trained crowds to respond to him. Ryan grabbed a sparring helmet from beside the mat and tossed it. Darnell caught it, one hand, without looking. The room didn't register what that meant. Ryan did. His eyes went slightly narrower for half a second. Then he reset his expression. Darnell held the helmet, turned it once in his hands, then set it down on the mat floor. I don't need that, he said. Ryan looked at the helmet on the floor, looked at Darnell. Your call. Your funeral. They squared up. Ryan in a textbook competition stance, left foot forward, hands high, chin tucked, weight balanced, the form of someone who had drilled it until it was automatic and knew it looked good. Darnell stood straight, feet shoulder width, arms at his sides, chin level, the posture of a man waiting for a bus in no particular hurry. The room loved it. Matt laughed at it. The janitor, who didn't even know how to stand. Ryan didn't waste time. He threw a jab, fast and clean, aimed at the chin. Darnell moved his head 2 inches left. The fist passed his ear. He didn't raise his hands, didn't step back, didn't change his expression, just moved his head. The way a door shifts in a draft. Ryan reset, threw across, more weight behind it. Darnell turned his torso slightly. The punch grazed the outer edge of his shoulder and went past. No real contact. The laughter in the room had already stopped. Ryan threw a front kick, snapping, aimed at the midsection. Darnell pivoted on his back foot. The kick found empty air. His feet made almost no sound on the mat. The murmuring started. Not commentary, confusion. The crowd updating what it thought it was watching. Ryan came with a combination. Jab, cross, hook, the sequence that had won him regional titles. Technical. Well-drilled. The thing his training partners had learned to respect. Darnell slipped the jab with a small shoulder rotation, parried the cross with his forearm. The sound of that contact was a sharp, flat crack that came off the mirror wall and filled the room. The hook found nothing, because Darnell was no longer where the hook was going. One step, unhurried, no scramble, no panic, no wasted movement anywhere. The room was dead silent, not bored, not confused anymore, when it has silent the way a ruse silent collectively realized it, fundamentally misread the situation, and doesn't yet have language for what it's watching instead. Ryan's breathing had changed, coming faster now. His footwork had developed a hitch, the small degradation that happens when the body starts serving frustration instead of training. He faked low and went high. Darnell didn't follow the fake. Wasn't there for the high shot either. Ryan circled right, threw a body kick. Darnell checked it with his knee, barely shifting his center of gravity. Ryan stopped moving. He stood on the mat and looked at Darnell, and the thing on his face was no longer performance, no longer the easy confidence of a man running a show. Something rawer had taken its place. The expression of someone who has understood, too late and too publicly, that everything he believed about a situation was wrong. Fight back. His voice came out louder than he'd intended. In the silence, it landed hard. Stop running and fight back. Darnell said nothing. He was not running. He had not taken a single backward step. He had moved sideways, diagonally, in and out of range with a precision that looked effortless because it had been built over 2 decades into something that genuinely was effortless. But he had not retreated once. Ryan came again. A flurry. Combinations thrown in sequence, each one faster than the last, technique fraying at the edges as desperation began driving instead of training. The crowd that had stopped making noise stayed stopped. Even the people who didn't understood on some levels that the story they'd come to watch had become a different story entirely. Then the spinning kick. Ryan set it up with a feint, dropped his shoulder right, and launched the spin-out back kick that opened his highlight reel. The move that had scored him points from Macon to Charlotte. His signature. The thing he did when he needed to remind himself and everyone watching that he was exceptional. Darnell read it before Ryan's body had finished deciding to throw it. In the shoulder drop, in the weight shifting to the left foot, in the gathering of the body that always preceded the rotation. He read it in the grammar of intention. He stepped inside. One unhurried stride, closing the distance before Ryan's body had completed the turn. For a full second, he was standing directly inside Ryan's guard, close enough that Ryan could see exactly what was in his expression. Calm, not the absence of feeling, not blankness. The calm of someone who has already made every relevant decision and is simply executing them in order. The calm of someone who knows precisely where this ends and has no anxiety about getting there. Ryan's leg completed its arc behind him. Hit nothing. Their eyes met. Darnell stepped back. He still had not thrown a single strike. Ryan stood on the mat with his chest heaving and his hands up, but no longer in things resembling proper guard. The arms too tense, the weight too far forward, sweat running off his jaw. Fight back. The crack in his voice was unmistakable. In a room that's silent, it was the loudest thing that had happened. Stop doing this and fight back. 30 phones kept recording in absolute silence. Darnell said nothing. Ryan charged. Overhand right. Everything behind it. No setup, no technique, no approach. Just the accumulated force of a man who has been publicly embarrassed and has run out of better options than to throw himself forward and hope. Darnell moved, off the center line. One step clean and complete. His right hand found Ryan's extended wrist. His left hand found the elbow. His body completed a rotation that took Ryan's own forward momentum and redirected it upward and over. One technique. The throw was textbook, not brutal, precisely enough. The kind of technique that exists to end something without destroying the person it's applied to. The kind that takes decades to make look that simple. Ryan's feet left the ground. For one suspended moment, she was fully airborne. 195 pounds rotating through empty air without purchase or control. Then he hit the mat. The sound of it filled the room like a physical thing, not the impact of violence. The impact of consequence, the sound of a story arriving at the ending it had always been heading toward. Ryan lay on his back, mouth open. The breath had left him in one involuntary exhalation on impact, and his chest was working in short, desperate pulls, trying to bring it back. He stared at the ceiling. He didn't get up. Nobody moved. 30-some people stood exactly where they were, phones still up. But nobody was reacting. Nobody was making the noise crowds make during entertainment, because this was not what they had come to see. Darnell stood at the edge of what had just happened, not over Ryan, not posturing, not giving the cameras anything, just standing, breathing steady, hands loose at his sides. He extended his right hand down. Ryan looked at it, his chest still working. His eyes had a quality Darnell recognized, the specific look of someone reconstructing their understandings of a situation from the beginning. Ryan's hand came up and knocked Darnell's away. Darnell nodded once, stepped off the mat, and then the door opened. Eldon Price was 63 years old, silver hair cropped close. The facade of a man who had spent decades in rooms exactly like this one and long since stopped being surprised by most of what he found in them. He carried his worn leather bag over one shoulder. He had driven 5 hours from Charlotte, a day ahead of schedule, because one of his fighters had twisted a knee and the trip had ended early. He pushed through the main entrance and stopped. His eyes moved across the room the way they always moved across rooms, quickly, taking inventory, reading what the arrangement of bodies and the quality of silence was telling him. Ryan on the mat, still on his back. Chest working. 30-some people standing around the perimeter, motionless. Phone screens everywhere, pointed at a single location. He followed their direction. Darnell Webb, at the edge of the mat, feet bare, work clothes. Standing hands at his sides, in the stillness of someone who has just done something that required everything, and is now simply present in what comes after. Price's bag slid off his shoulder, hit the floor. He walked 3 steps into the cleared free space and stopped. He looked at Darnell. The long look of someone who once knew this man very well and is reconciling that knowledge with what he is seeing now. Then Eldon Price placed his feet together, straightened his back, and bowed. Not a nod, not a casual inclination, a full, deep, formal bow. The kind that carries meaning in every tradition of combat training that has ever existed anywhere. The kind that says, I see what you are, I know what I'm looking at. The room did not breathe. Price straightened. It's been a long time, he said quietly, not for just for Darnell. Coach Webb, he said. The title landed like something physical. In the back corner, Becca Strand held her phone steady, wide angle, nothing cropped. 30-some people stood in complete silence and watched 2 men complete a gesture the room didn't have vocabulary for, but understood immediately, completely, in the chest rather than the mind. Someone in the back whispered, "What the hell?" The video went up that evening. Becca didn't add music, didn't add text overlays or dramatic cuts, or anything that announced how the audience was supposed to feel. 6 minutes and 47 seconds unedited from the moment Ryan said get on the mat to the moment Price bowed. Title. Black belt corners Janitor into a fight. His old coach walks in. By 9 o'clock that night, 400,000 views. By midnight, over 1 million. The shares moved faster than the views. Not people posting it for the algorithm. People texting it directly to other people. Watch this right now. Drop what you're doing and watch this. The clip of Price bowing traveled separately. Stripped from its context, it still carried the full weight of what it was. An old man walking into a room and bowing to a janitor. People who had never set foot in a gym, who wouldn't know a training system from a treadmill, felt immediately what it meant. The hashtag appeared on its own. Nobody organized it. Stand with Darnell. Trending in Atlanta by midnight. National by 2 in the morning. Darnell did not look at his phone that night. He went home. He ate. He called Clearwater to leave a message with the evening nurse that he'd had a long day but was fine. His mother had gone to sleep early. The nurse said, "Good evening, clear stretch." He thanked her and hung up. Then he called Calvin. Calvin answered immediately. "I've been watching the views," he said. "How bad does it look?" Darnell said, "For you?" Calvin said, "It doesn't look bad. It looks extraordinary." A pause. "The other side hasn't moved yet." "They will," Darnell said. "Yes," Calvin said. "They will." Douglas Holt is going to see this as an attack on his son and his family name, and his relationship with attacks is to counterattack. He'll find a way to reframe this. He'll find someone to help him do it. When? Soon. Get some sleep. Let me start pulling what I need. A pause. And Darnell, don't delete anything. Don't post anything. Don't talk to anyone you don't trust completely. "I know," Darnell said. "I know you know," Calvin said, saying it anyway. Darnell slept, the deep, thick sleep of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and has finally set it down long enough to breathe. Sunday was ordinary. Monday was not. The papers arrived at 2:15 in the afternoon. A process server knocked on his apartment door with the flat courtesy of someone performing a task, handed him the envelope, and left. Darnell opened it at his kitchen table. Criminal complaint. Fulton County, filed on behalf of Ryan Holt, assault and battery. Plaintiff's attorney, Grant Fowler. He typed the name into his phone knowing what he'd find. Named partner. 22nd floor downtown. The kind of attorney whose firm photograph conveyed, precisely and intentionally, that Lousings was not something he's with. He called Calvin. "They filed," Darnell said. "I know. I already got the notification, boss. Are you okay?" Darnell looked at the papers on his table. "I have $287 in my account," he said. "My mother's next payment is due in 8 days. I just got served by a lawyer who probably charges more per hour than I make in a week." A pause. "So no," Darnell said, "but I'm not falling apart either." "Good," Calvin said. "Don't fall apart yet. I need you steady for a while." The edited clip appeared Tuesday morning. 14 seconds. No context, no build-up. No 6 minutes of Ryan throwing strikes that Darnell had absorbed and managed. Just the throw. Ryan airborne, Ryan hitting the mat, Ryan on his back unable to breathe. Channel 4 ran it first. By noon it was on 3 local stations. By evening it had reached 2 national news aggregators. Channel 4, local gym employee accused of assault after viral video. Channel 7, violent confrontation at Atlanta Fitness Academy leads to criminal filing. A talk radio host in the afternoon drive slot called Darnell a powgag in its gray shirt. Said the real story wasn't what happened Saturday. Said the real story was why a man with that kind of training was working a custodial job at a gym, and maybe people should be asking questions about that. The comment section split clean. People who had seen FXF's full 6 minutes and 47 seconds understood exactly what had happened and were loud about it. But millions more had only seen 14 seconds. And 14 seconds was its own complete story. A large man in work clothes throwing a younger man to the ground. 14 seconds had no helmet Ryan had tossed. No 6 attempts Ryan had made before the throw. No Price walking through the door. 14 seconds was enough. Darnell was suspended without pay Tuesday afternoon. Lorraine called at 4:15, her voice carrying the quality of someone reading from a script she hadn't written and didn't believe in. "The board voted," she said. "Pending resolution of the legal matter, your access to the facility is suspended. Pay is paused effective immediately. I understand, Darnell said. I'm sorry, she said. The script ran out. Her own voice came back. I genuinely am, Darnell. I know, he said. He hung up and did the $287. $495 due in 8 days. No paycheck coming. He looked at the photograph of his mother on the windowsill. She was laughing at the cookout, head tilted back, completely unguarded. The Eleanor he'd had before all of this, he sat with that for a while. Then he got up and made dinner. Thursday, the preliminary hearing. Sat in a courtroom for the first time in his adult life and discovered that courtroom silence had a different weight than any other kind. Official. Dense. The sense of the room having expectations that existed independently of the people inside it. Grant Fowler was better in person than his photograph suggested. The suit fit exactly right. The posture was calibrated without appearing to be. He moved through the room with the ease of someone who had spent more time in spaces like this than most people spent in any single location across their entire lives. He made his arguments with smooth efficiency, the kind that comes from having performed the same type of task several hundred times. Then he requested the court admit Darnell's sealed military record. Calvin objected immediately. Clear and forceful. Relevance challenged. Privacy considerations cited. The harm of using sealed records in a context they were sealed specifically to prevent. The judge considered. Fowler argued pattern and character. Prior history of violence, if it existed, was relevant to the current claim. The court had an interest in knowing. The judge allowed it. Limited scope, but allowed. Fowler opened the file. He read slowly. The way a skilled attorney reads when each word is meant to arrive separately and find its own landing place. During his final active duty period at Fort Bragg, the defendant engaged in a physical altercation with 2 senior enlisted service members. Both were hospitalized. The severity of the incident was sufficient to warrant sealing of the record. The its military determined incident required not merely documentation but concealment. He paused. Let concealment sit in the room for a moment. This is not the first time Darnell Webb has used force beyond any reasonable standard, Fowler said. The pattern this court is being asked to examine did not begin last Saturday afternoon. The room shifted, reporters wrote. Camera shutters clicked from the gallery. Darnell looked at a fixed point on the wall across from him and kept his face still. Under the table, Calvin's hand found his forearm briefly, not a signal, just present. That evening, the headlines were a different kind. Janitor sealed military record revealed in court. Prior violence as alleged. The talk radio host had material now and used all of it. The hashtags stand with Darnell fractured, half still with him. The other half shifting. The way crowds shift when something they'd committed to suddenly requires more complexity than they'd signed up for. Darnell drove home from the courthouse without turning on the radio. He drove to Clearwater instead. He didn't go in. He sat in the parking lot with the engine running, to second floor window, his mother's room. The light was on behind the curtains, the ordinary warmth of a room where someone he loved was going about the business of an evening. He thought about the math, the money. 8 days now. 7! He took out his phone, called Calvin. They used it, he said. I know, I was there. It was quiet a moment, Darnell. That record has 2 sides. Everything Fowler read tonight is one side of it. There's a name on the other side. Troy Dillard, Darnell said. His account is the full record, Calvin said. What Fowler read was a selected portion, strategically chosen. Darnell looked at his mother's window. He slid it to protect himself, Darnell said. I'm not going to pull him into this because I need something from him. That's a decent instinct, Calvin said. And it might cost you everything. I'm not telling you what to decide. I'm telling you what the situation is. A pause. He deserves the chance to make his own choice. You made a choice for him 8 years ago by staying quiet. Maybe let him decide this time. Darnell sat with that. I don't have his number, he said. I can find the unit, Calvin said. The rest is yours. Calvin sent the contact information Friday afternoon. Fort Liberty, North Carolina, reached through the base's main line. Darnell called at 2 o'clock. The basics operator transferred him. He explained he was trying to reach Sergeant Dillard. Personal matter, non-emergency. He was transferred again. Another extension. 4 rings. Voicemail. Generic. No name on it. He left a message, his name. His number. 1 sentence. I need to speak with you when you have time.
No, he hung up. Friday afternoon passed. Friday evening, he ate dinner, tried to sleep, managed some of it.
Thought about his mother, about the math, about a room at Fort Bragg in November 2016, and the specific weight of the choice it had made inside it. Sadder, nothing. Nothing. He did his grocery shopping. $43, careful. He cleaned his apartment. He did not look at his phone more than he could help. Saturday evening, he sat on the floor of his apartment back against the wall, the chair across the room, farther away than he felt like getting up to reach. Rain against the window, the steady Atlanta summer rain that arrives without warning and then commits completely. His phone rang at 7:43. North Carolina area code, he answered. Silence for a moment. Then a voice, steady but carrying something careful underneath it. The voice of a man who had thought through what he was going to say before he said it. Is this Darnell Webb? Yes, Darnell said. A longer pause. This is Troy Dillard. Darnell closed his eyes for a moment. I got your message, Dillard said. I know why you called. Breath. I've been following what's been happening. I saw both clips. Something shifted in his voice. Something that had been held in place for a long time. I need you to know something before we go further. I kept that record sealed because I thought it protected you. Thought staying quiet meant you could move forward. Have a life that wasn't defined by one night in the room. I understand, Darnell said. But what Fowler did in that courtroom, Dillard said. That's not what happened. That's half of what happened and not the more important half. I know, Darnell said. The other half belongs to me, Dillard said. It's been sitting with me for 8 years. Rain against the window. I'm not calling to ask you to do anything, Darnell said carefully. I'm calling because you deserve to know where things stand. And because someone reminded me that I made a choice for you 8 years ago by not asking. I shouldn't make that choice again. A long silence. What do you need? Dillard said. The truth, Darnell said, on record, what actually happened that night. Not the sealed summary, the whole thing. Silence. I won't push you, Darnell said. If you say no, I understand it completely. And how has the silence worked out for you? Dillard said quietly, no bitterness in it. Just an honest question from a man asking it of both of them. Darnell looked at the rain on the glass. Not well, he said. Troy Dillard exhaled. I'll need a few days, he said. Take what you need, Darnell said. I'm saying no, Dillard said. I'm saying I need to be sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. Not guilt, not because of what they said in court. I understand that, Darnell said. I'll call you, Dillard said. He hung up. Darnell sat on the floor of his apartment with the phone in his hand and the rain working at the window and the refrigerator doing its low, constant work in the kitchen. He thought about what it cost a person to carry something alone for 8 years. He knew that cost precisely, in the way you know costs you've been paying for a long time without ever adding them up all at once. He thought about his mother's voice. Don't disappear from this one. He sat on the floor of his apartment and he did not disappear. He waited. The rain came down outside. He waited. The call came on a Tuesday, not the next day, not Sunday, Tuesday. 3 days after Darnell had sat on his apartment floor, listening to Troy Dillard breathe through a decision that wasn't small and couldn't be rushed. 3 days of waiting. Darnell had filled them the way he always filled difficult time. With the ordinary, with the manageable. He cleaned his apartment. He went to the grocery store and spent $41 carefully. The way you spend money, when you know exactly how much is left and what it has to cover. He called Clearwater every evening. His mother was having a clear stretch, the phrase the nurses used when Eleanor's mind was more present than absent, when she recognized voices and asked questions and laughed at things that were actually funny. On Monday, she asked him how the gym was going. He told her it was going through some changes. She said that sounded like a careful way of saying something harder. He said she wasn't wrong. She said she raised him to handle hard things. He said he knew. Tuesday at 11 in the morning, his phone rang. North Carolina area code. He was standing at his kitchen window watching a delivery driver argue with a parking meter 4 floors below. The kind of small, ordinary frustration that the rest of the world kept having, regardless of what was happening in Darnell's life. He answered. "I'll do it," Troy Dillard had said. No preamble. No revisiting the previous conversation. Just that. Darnell clashed, stood at the window, and felt something's chest just. Not relief exactly. Something quieter than relief. The settling of a weight that had been carried at a difficult angle for too long, finally finding a more bearable position. "You're sure," Darnell said. "I've been sure since Sunday," Dillard said. "I just needed to make sure I was sure for the right reasons. Not guilt, not because of what they said in court about you." A pause. "Because it's true, and because letting a lie stand in public when you know the truth makes you part of the lie." Darnell didn't say anything for a moment. "I'm going to connect you with my attorney," he said. "Calvin Shaw. He'll handle the recording and the logistics. He'll make it as clean as he can." "All right," Dillard said. "Troy," Darnell said. "Yeah, I mean it when I say you don't owe me this." A brief pause, the kind that means someone is choosing their words with care. "I know you mean it," Dillard said. "That's actually why I'm doing it." He hung up. Darnell stood at the window. The delivery driver below had resolved his situation with the parking meter and was pulling boxes from the back of a white van, stacking them on a dolly with the focused efficiency of someone who did this exact thing 200 times a day and had stopped thinking about it as anything other than the work. Darnell watched him for a while. Then he called Calvin. Calvin Shaw had been a Marine before he was a lawyer, and the combination had produced a man who was methodical about obstacles, unsentimental about difficulty, and very good at asking the right question at the right moment. When Darnell called him, Calvin had already been building for a week. He had filed motions, made requests, sat cross tables from people who were hesitant and waited them out with the patience of someone who understood that hesitation and refusal were different things. The motion to preserve all security camera footage from Apex for the 90 days before the incident had gone through without resistance. Becca Strand's full, unedited recording had been formally subpoenaed. 6 minutes and 47 seconds. Time-stamped. In legal record now, which meant it could not be quietly made to disappear. Ryan Holt's complete disciplinary history at Apex Academy had been requested. That last one was where things started to open up. Because there was a disciplinary history. Calvin had suspected it from the way Ryan moved through Becca's footage, the ease of it, the comfort of a man who had done this before without consequence. Behavior that practiced didn't look like behavior that was new, he was right. 3 written complaints, filed formally with gym management over the previous 2 years. 2 from former members. 1 from a part-time instructor who had quit 6 months ago, citing an environment that made professional work impossible. Each complaint documented specific incidents, specific dates, specific witnesses present. Each complaint had been formally acknowledged. Not one had been acted on. Calvin pulled the donation records and laid them beside the complaint records on his desk, in chronological order, and looked at the sequence for a long time. First complaint filed in February. Donation from the Holt family the following March. New flooring for the main training hall. Second complaint filed in August. Donation in September. Complete equipment refreshed throughout the facility. Third complaint filed in January of the current year. Donation in February. Renovated locker room. Brass nameplate on the wall. Calvin sat with that sequence. Then he called Lorraine Osei. Lorraine had managed Apex Academy for 6 years. She was organized, fair-minded, and had spent 6 years making peace with the limits of her own power within the structure she worked inside. She had watched things happen she didn't approve of. She had made choices she wasn't proud of. She had done the math that her mortgage and her children's school tuition required, and made the decisions the math demanded. But she had kept records. That was the thing about Lorraine. She kept everything. Folders for everything. The complaints, the responses, the donations, the correspondence, the full sequence of events that anyone looking at the timeline clearly could only read one way. She sat across from Calvin in his downtown office on Wednesday afternoon with a folder in her lap and her hands folded on top of it. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I'm not doing this because I suddenly found courage I didn't have before. I'm doing this because what happened to Darnell is on me as much as it's on Ryan Holt. I can live with a lot of things." She paused. "I can't live with that. I'm not here to judge the past," Calvin said. "I'm here to document the pattern." She slid the folder across the desk. He opened it. Every complaint, every donation, every date aligned with every decision, every name. He looked up at her. "You kept all of this," he said. "I keep everything," she said. "I kept it because I knew this day would come eventually. People like Ryan Holt always push until something pushes back." Her voice stayed even. "I just didn't expect it to take this long." Calvin closed the folder carefully. "I need a signed statement," he said. "I know," she said. "I brought a pen." The night before the mediation hearing, Darnell couldn't sleep. But this time it was different from the other sleepless nights. Not the grinding, anxious insomnia of a man who doesn't know what's coming. Not the 3 a.m. arithmetic of money and time and impossible math. This was the alert, clear wakefulness of someone whose mind has finished its processing and is simply waiting for the world to catch up. He lay on his mattress and looked at the ceiling. He thought about Fort Bragg. About the hours after the storage room. Sitting in the dark outside the barracks, wondering what the sealed record would mean for the rest of his life. Whether the right thing he'd done would become something used against him. Whether staying quiet about his own training had been wisdom's or something else wearing wisdom's clothing. He had never fully settled that question. It occurred to him now that maybe both things could be true at once, that a choice could be correct and costly simultaneously, and the cost didn't reach back and make the choice wrong. It just made it expensive. And he'd been paying the price so long he'd stopped noticing how much he'd spent. He thought about his mother, Eleanor Webb, at her best. The woman who had raised him in a house where honesty was the baseline and excuses were examined with gentle but genuine skepticism. Who had worked 31 years as a hospital administrator and not once, to his knowledge, traded something true for something convenient. He thought about what she'd said on Friday night. "Don't disappear from this one." He thought about what Knott's Apherbed had actually cost him. 7 years of arriving through a Bacter. 7 years of making himself easy to overlook. 7 years of choosing the smallest version of himself, because the alternative felt like something he'd already proven he couldn't be trusted with. He had called it restraint. Lying in the dark, in the honest quiet of a sleepless night, he admitted it had also been fear. Not only the fear of what his hands might do, though that was real. Underneath that was something simpler, something more human. Fear of being known, of taking up the space his actual size required, of being seen as something specific, and having people form expectations around that specific thing, and then discovering he couldn't sustain it. The mop had solved all of that. The mop asked for nothing. Let him exist in a room full of people, without anyone requiring anything of him beyond a clean floor. He had chosen that. He could say it clearly now, and now he was choosing something else. He got up at 5:30, made coffee, sat at his kitchen table as the light came up over Atlanta, slow and golden and without drama, the city emerging from the dark the way it did every morning, regardless of what was happening inside it. He put on the clothes he'd laid out the night before. Clean slacks, a white button-down shirt he'd ironed the previous evening, shoes he'd polished. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror for a moment. He looked for the first time in a long time, like a man who was not trying to disappear. Fulton County Courthouse, Room 4B. The mediation room was smaller than a courtroom but carried the same official weight. Fluorescent lighting that didn't flatter anyone. A long oak table with chairs arranged to suggest neutrality, though everyone present understood that was a legal courtesy rather than a description of reality. Judge Barbara Owensons arrived precisely at 9. 61 years old, reading glasses on a beaded chain. The face of a woman who had spent 3 decades mediating disputes between people who believed their conflict was uniquely complicated and had discovered over those 3 decades that it rarely was. She sat at the head of the table without ceremony. "This is a mediation proceeding, not a trial," she said. "But I expect the same standard of honesty I would require in any court. We're here to establish facts and reach resolution. Let's do that without wasting each other's morning." On the right side of the table sat Douglas Holt and Ryan Holt, flanked by Grant Fowler and a paralegal with 2 leather binders stacked neatly in front of her. Douglas wore a charcoal suit that fit the way expensive suits fit, like it had been made for exactly this body and no other. Ryan sat in a blazer, jaw set, eyes directed at a point slightly above the center of the table. He had not looked at Darnell since entering the room. On the left sat Darnell and Calvin, one manila folder, one laptop. Calvin's 12-year-old Navy suit, which fit him well because he'd kept the same dimensions for its 12 years. Through the disciplines of someone as one who had decided early what kind of man he was going to be and had not deviated from it. Fowler opened. He was good. Darnell had expected good, and Fowler delivered it. The voice, the pacing, the way he introduced information as though sharing it was a service he was performing for everyone present. He laid out the assault claim with the brisk confidence of a man who had decided how the story ended and was simply providing the audience with the correct sequence of events to reach his conclusion. He played the 14-second clip on a small screen. The room watched it. A large man in work clothes, a younger man airborne. Impact. Fowler let it run once. Then again. The plaintiff sustained impact injuries and significant distress as a result of this unprovoked attack, Fowler said. The defendant had no standing to be on that mat. No authorized instructor invited him onto a training surface. He inserted himself into a training environment and applied a level of force to a civilian that the evidence will show he has applied before, in other contexts, with other people. He pulled up the sealed record summary. Same language he'd used in the preliminary hearing. Same carefully selected sentences. Same pause in the same place. Pattern of behavior, Fowler said. That is what this court is looking at. He sat down. Judge Owens looked at Calvin. Calvin didn't stand. He opened his laptop, angled the screen towards Owens clearly. When he spoke, his voice was even. The voice of someone who has no performance to give because what they have is enough on its own. "I'd like to begin with a witness statement," he said. "Recorded 2 days ago." He pressed play. Troy Dillard appeared on screen. He was in uniform, sitting at a desk in a standard military office. The lighting was a laptop camera's unforgiving fluorescent. He looked his age and then a few extra years of things he hadn't asked to carry. He looked directly into the camera, and he talked. Not with formal language, not with the careful phrasing of someone managing a public statement. He spoke the way a person speaks. They have decided to stop managing something and simply tell it, from the beginning, in order, without leaving out the parts that cost something to say. He talked about Fort Bragg, about us 2016, about what had been done to him over several weeks by 2 men who held rank over him and understood exactly how rank could be used to prevent consequences, about the night Darnell had come through the door. He talked about what Darnell had done, specifically and in sequence. What force had been necessary for him to stop what was happening and what had not been used because it wasn't necessary. He talked about the hospitalization of the 2 men in terms that made clear it had resulted from what they had been doing and from the minimum force required to end it. He talked about the sealing. "I asked for the record to be sealed," he said, "to protect my identity, to protect my ability to continue serving without this defining every professional relationship I had going forward." Darnell Webb agreed. He didn't argue it. He signed the paperwork, and he never spoke about it again to anyone. He stopped for a moment. The sealed record does not say Darnell Webb did something wrong. The sealed record exists because I asked for protection, and he gave it to me, at cost to himself. A cost I understood, at the time, less than I should have. His hands on the desk were still. I have followed what has been happening at Apex Academy, he said. I watched the full footage. I read the coverage. I want to state clearly, for whatever record this becomes part of, that the characterization of Darnell Webb as a man with a pattern of excessive violence is false. He intervened when intervention was required. He used what was needed and nothing more. The same thing he did at Fort Bragg is what he did on that mat. Minimum force. Complete control. He looked into the camera with the steady, tired eyes of someone putting something heavy for the first time. I should have said this sooner, he said. I didn't. I'm saying it now. Calvin closed the laptop. The room was quiet. Douglas Holt's jaw was positioned at an angle that suggested considerable effort to keep it where it was. Ryan was looking at the table, not the middle distance, the actual surface of the table, as though it contained something that required his full attention. Calvin opened the Mila folder. He laid the documents out one I am in sequence and without hurrying. Becca Strand's recording. 6 minutes and 47 seconds. Time-stamped, unedited, formally entered. The full record of every strike Ryan had thrown before Darnell had moved at all. The security camera footage. 90 days of it. 14 documented incidents with dates, times, and locations within the facility. The drone pad, the mop bucket, the dumpster behind the building, the break room, the footprints on the clean floor, the full catalog of 3 months of what had been happening without intervention, the 3 complaint documents, filed, acknowledged, not acted on, the donation records, dated the month following each complaint, specific amounts, specific improvements to the facility they had funded, Lorraine Ossi's signed statement. 3 pages. Specific and factual, written in the voice of a woman who had decided to stop carrying someone else's weight. 8 additional statements from current members who had witnessed incidents between Ryan and Darnell over the previous 3 months. Calvin spread them across the table in a row and then stepped back and looked at Fowler. Grant Fowler wants to tell this court that Darnell Webb is a dangerous man hiding a violent history, Calvin said. What these documents describe is something else entirely. Anson who spent 3 months absorbing target harassment from a student whose family finances this facility. A man who, when coerced onto a training mat in front of 35 people, defended himself without throwing a single offensive technique. 1 throw, after 6 minutes of absorbing attacks from a trained competitor, and who extended his hand to the man on the floor when it was done. He looked at Fowler, then at Douglas. This case was not filed because Ryan Holt was injured, Calvin said. Ryan Holt was not injured. He was thrown to a mat during a sparring situation he engineered in front of a crowd he assembled using a platform he paid for. He will recover completely. A pause. This case was filed because Ryan Holt was publicly embarrassed, and his father treats public embarrassment as an attack requiring a financial and legal counterattack. That is not a cause of action. That is a pattern of using institutional power to silence people who cannot easily defend themselves. It's the same Pat documented in this folder. He placed his hand flat on the stack of papers. Silence. Judge Owens had her glasses on. She had been reading the documents as Calvin placed them, not skimming. Her expression had not changed, but her attention had shifted into the mode of someone who has stopped swatting to see where something goes, because she has already seen where it goes. She looked at Douglas Holt. Mr. Holt, she said, I've reviewed the full footage and the complaint history. I want to be direct with you before I hear your attorney's response. She paused. What I'm looking at is not evidence of misconduct by the respondent. What I'm looking at is evidence of systematic harassment that was financially incentivized to continue. I want your attorney to understand how I'm reading this record before he responds to it. Fowler leaned toward Douglas. Something murmured between them, brief and quiet. Douglas sat with his hands flat on the table, the posture of a man reassembling himself in real time. He had built a business on the ability to absorb setback and reroute without showing the adjustment. He raised a hand. Your Honor, he said. His voice was smooth, controlled. In the interest of all parties, my client is prepared to discuss a private resolution. A mutual withdrawal, appropriate confidentiality provisions. No, one word. Quiet enough that it shouldn't have stopped, but it did. Everyone turned. Darnell was looking at Judge Owens, not at Douglas, not at Ryan, not performing anything for anyone in the room, just speaking to the person with the authority to actually hear him. No settlement, he said. No confidentiality agreement. Calvin put a hand briefly on his arm. I want it on the public record, Darnell said. Everything that happened. Every incident. The complaints, the donations, the Fort Sensei slip and what it left out. I want it on the record, where anyone who needs to find it can find it. His voice did not rise, did not shake. He wasn't angry. He was something cleaner than angry. He was done being the version of himself that other people could negotiate away in a private room. Calvin straightened beside him. Client requests formal findings on my side, all documented evidence. Dismissal of all claims with prejudice and formal notation of the harassment pattern in the court's record for reference in any future proceedings. Judge Owens looked at Darnell for a long moment, the look of a person deciding whether someone is who they appear to be. Then she turned to address the full room. I'm granting the motion, she said. All claims against Darnell Webb are dismissed with prejudice. The evidence of workplace harassment is preserved in the court record. The documentation of financial influence over complaint resolution at this facility will be referred to the appropriate regulatory bodies for review. She picked up her pen. I'm also referring the matter of the edited 14-second clip to the district attorney's offices. The deliberate removal of context for the purpose of reframing a legal matter in the public record is something that office will need to evaluate. She paused, looked at Douglas Holt with the attention of a woman who had spent 30 years watching people believe that money was a sufficient substitute for accountability. I would strongly encourage your family to step very carefully from this point forward, she said. She closed the folder. Douglas stood without a word. His posture remained exact. The suit without a crease. The face of a man who had lost before and knew how to carry it in public without letting it show. Ryan stood beside him, eyes on the floor, and followed his father out. Fowler packed his binders. His paralegal stacked them with professional efficiency. They filed out in silence. The door closed with the soft final click of a room that is finished with something. Calvin let out a long breath. He looked at Darnell. You okay, he said. Darnell looked at the empty chairs across the table. Yeah, he said, and he was. Not in the way that means nothing difficult remains. In the way that means the weight is finally distributed correctly. The way your body feels after carrying something at a wrong angle for too long, and someone helps you shift it to both shoulders. He was okay. The news moved fast. Public court records in Fulton County are exactly that. Public. And by late afternoon, every outlet that had run the 14-second clip was running the correction. Channel 4, which had led with local gym employee accused of assault, now led with charges dropped against Apex Janitor as course or covers 3-year harassment pattern. Channel 7 followed within the hour. The talk radio host who had called Darnell a powder keg in a gray shirt issued a 40-second on-air statement that contained the word "suffy" twice and the word "context" 4 times. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Becca reposted her original footage with a single sack of text. The full story, 6 minutes and 47 seconds. No edits, no cuts, no version of events that required anything to be left out. By evening, it had 9 million views. Thus, the comments were what comic content sections always are, loud and mixed, and only loosely connected to the thing they claimed to be responding to. But underneath the noise, something kept appearing in different forms from different people, in reposts, and in the text messages people sent each other saying, "Watch this. Drop what you're doing." The phrase that traveled most was simple. He didn't have to do that, meaning Darnell didn't have to stay, didn't have to get on the mat, didn't have to choose the harder thing when the easier thing was right there. He didn't have to, but he did. That was the part that spread. Apex held an emergency board meeting the Thursday after the hearing. Eldon Price ran it. He stood at the head of the table in the Academy's small conference room and spoke for less than 3 minutes. "We took money to stay quiet," he said. "That's what the record shows. We can debate the specifics of individual decisions all we want, but that's what it amounts to. Money came in and complaints went away." He looked around the table. "I was not here. I should have been here more than I was. That is on me, and I'm not going to explain it away." He paused. "It ends today. All of it." The board voted unanimously. Ryan Holt was permanently expelled from Apex Academy. A formal notice was filed with the regional training associations governing the competitive circuit Ryan had competed in. His record would reflect the expulsion in any future registration attempt. Every piece of equipment the Holt family had donated was identified, inventoried, and either returned or removed. The new flooring, the equipment refresh, the renovated locker room. Douglas Holt's brass nameplate came off the wall in the locker room hallway with 4 screws and about 40 seconds of work. Lorraine Osei carried it out to the dumpster in the back parking lot herself. She set it inside carefully, because she was not a person who slammed things, and she walked back inside without looking at it again. The board issued a public statement. Short, no corporate language, no passive instructions designed to distribute blame so widely it landed on no one in particular. "We failed Darnell Webb. We allowed financial influence to override the safety and dignity of a member of our staff. We are committed to ensuring this does not happen again. We owe him not just an apology, but action." Nobody asked Darnell to review the statement before it went out. When he read it, he thought that was probably the right call. Price called him on a Friday morning. Not a text, a phone call. The direct line he'd given Darnell when he first came to work at Apex. The one Darnell had never needed to use until now. "Come in today," he said, "when you have time." I have time now," Darnell said. He drove to Apex. The parking lot looked different in the morning, quieter. A few cars belonging to instructors running early classes. The sound of training from inside, the rhythm of repetition, someone counting in a steady voice. He went in through the front door. For the first time, Price was in his office behind the main training hall, the small room with the window that looked out onto the mat area. Had cleaned Sos's office hundreds of times. He knew every corner of it, the stack of tournament programs on the left shelf that Price had kept for 20 years and would apparently keep forever. The photograph on the desk of the first team Price had ever coached to a state title 23 years ago, 8 young faces in matching uniforms squinting into the sun. Price was behind the desk when Darnell came in. They looked at each other. Neither of them said anything for a moment, because they were both men who had learned over years that silence was sometimes more accurate than words. "Sit down," Price said. Darnell sat. "I owe you more than an apology," Price said. "I know that. I've spent a week out trying to find the right formulation, and I haven't found it. So I'm going to skip the formulation and tell you what I want to do, and you tell me if it's enough." He reached into his desk drawer, put a folded garment on the desk between them. White, clean and pressed. A black belt coiled in a neat circle on top of it. Darnell looked at it. "I want you on the schedule," Price said. "Co-instructor, full-time. Benefits, your name on the board, on the class listings, on whatever the Academy puts out publicly." He paused. "I want it visible. Not to make a point, because it's accurate." Darnell looked at the gi on the desk. He didn't reach for it immediately. "The program I want to build," he said. "The thing I've been thinking about." "Tell me," Price said. Darnell had been thinking about it longer than he'd admitted to himself. It had started as a shape without edges and had clarified over weeks of waiting and sleepless nights and long drives to Clearwater and back into something specific enough to describe. "People who don't have access to this," he said. "People who work nights, who clean buildings and drive buses and stock shell cells at midnight. The people who are in every room and invisible in every room." He paused. "I want to offer them something nobody offered me. A place to stand. On a mat. Under real instruction. Learning what their bodies can do." He looked at Price. "Free. No tuition. No membership fees. Saturday mornings when the building isn't fully used." Price looked at him for a long moment. How many would come, he said. I don't know, Darnell said honestly, but some would, and some is enough to start. Price nodded slowly. Operational costs come from the Academy's budget, he said. Equipment, mat time, administration, whatever the program needs to run. He met Darnell's eyes. You design it, you run it. I stay out of your way unless you need something from me. Darnell looked at the gi on the desk. He picked it up. The fabric was clean and had the weight of something that had been cared for. He held it in both hands for a moment. First class next Saturday, Price said. Darnell looked up. Next Saturday, he said. He didn't tell many people. Becca found out and asked if she could film. He said yes without conditions, which he understood to mean full duration, no edits, wide angle, exactly what it had meant before. She nodded and showed up Saturday morning at 7:30 to get her position set before anyone arrived. Calvin found out and offered to handle whatever legal structure the program needed. Liability documentation, insurance, the administrative framework that made something official rather than informal. Pro bono. Darnell started to object. Calvin told him to stop objecting and let him do something constructive with the law degree. Lorraine Osei quietly reached out to 3 community organizations and 2 neighborhood churches within a 10-mile radius. She passed along the information about the class, telling Darnell she was doing it. He found out afterward, when the number of people had arrived on Saturday was larger than he'd planned for. 28. He had prepared for maybe 12. 28 people came through the doors of Apex Fighting Academy on a Saturday morning in November. They came in work clothes and gym clothes and whatever they had available. A hotel housekeeper, who had come straight from her last room of the night shift, still seeing the specific tiredness of someone who had been on her feet for 8 hours doing work that required a kind of precision most people never thought about. A city bus driver in his off-duty jacket, a thick man in his 50s who moved the way people move when their body has been doing physical labor for decades and knows the cost of it. A man who restocked a grocery store from 11 at night until 6 in the morning and had not yet gone home to sleep. A woman who cleaned offices in a downtown building and approached her teenage daughter, because she wanted her daughter to understand from a young age what her own body was capable of. They filed into the main training hall and looked around the way people look around a room they were not designed to be in, waiting to find out whether that was going to be a problem. Darnell was at the front of the mat. White gi. Black belt, tied the way Price had taught him to tie it when he was 23 years old, the knot he had done 1,000 times since. He had looked at himself in the bathroom mirror before walking out and had felt simultaneously that he recognized and did not recognize the person looking back, which was not a contradiction. Which was, he thought, probably what it felt like when something finally went back to where it was supposed to be. He stood at the front of the mat and looked at 28 people who were not athletes, not competitors, not anyone the fitness industry spent much designing programs for. He did not give a speech. He had thought about what to say, had run versions of it in his head during the drive over, had nearly written something down. But standing there in the clean morning light of a gym that smelled like rubber mats and the particular possibility of a Saturday that hadn't been decided yet, he was understood that a speech was the wrong thing. What these people needed was not to be told something. What they needed was to be shown something. He bowed. They looked at each other. Then, following the anding instinct people carry even when they don't know where they got it, they bowed back. And he began to teach. Becca stood in the corner and filmed. She caught what phone cameras held at eye level couldn't because she knew where to look, not at the techniques, at the faces. The hotel housekeeper's expression in the moment she landed her first correct block and felt, for possibly the first time, what it meant to move her own body with intention rather than just necessity. The bus driver, 53 years old, discovering that his body remembered things his mind hadn't known it knew. The grocery store worker, who had spent 30 years being told by the physical demands of his job that his body was a tool, spending one Saturday morning learning that it was also a language. The teenage daughter, who started the class with the mild boredom of a teenager brought somewhere by a parent and ended it asking when the next session was. Becca put together 14 minutes. No narration, no music, no title cards explaining what the audience was supposed to feel. Just the footage in order, from the moment the first student walked through the door to the moment the last one lab left. The Invisible Belt Program, Apex Fighting Academy, Atlanta. It went up the following Wednesday, 3 million views in 48 hours. Not because it was dramatic, because it was true. The kind of truth that is specific enough to be recognizable, that shows people something they know from the inside, even if they've never seen it from the outside. A community film festival in Atlanta accepted it for their winter program. A documentary series reached out the following week. A second academy in Georgia asked about adopting the curriculum. Then one in Tennessee. Darnsill said yes to what he could manage and asked Calvin to help him figure out the rest. Calvin said he would, and did, because that was what Calvin did. Ryan Holt did not disappear. That would have been cleaner in some ways. But Atlanta was not large enough for clean disappearances, and Ryan's face had been on enough screens that erasure wasn't available to him. He enrolled in a 12-week anger management program in Marietta. Court recommended, though he had registered before the recommendation arrived, a distinction that mattered to him even if it didn't register and is meaningful to anyone else's. He attended every session. He sat in the circle and said the required things, and then over weeks began saying things that weren't required but were true. He stayed for 8 weeks beyond the program's end. He did not post about it, did not discuss it publicly, did reach out to anyone who had been in that room on a Saturday afternoon, watching him fail in front of a crowd, except once. 4 months after the hearing, a plain white envelope arrived at Apex. No return address on the back. Laura opened it the way she opened all the mail, methodically, at her desk with her coffee going cold beside her. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Handwritten, 2 sentences. I was wrong. I'm working on it. She recognized the handwriting without needing to consider it. She brought it to Darnell after the Tuesday evening class, when the students had gone and the gym was settling into its end-of-day quiet. She handed it to him without comment. He read it, read it again, stood with the paper in his hand for a moment. There were things he could have felt about 2 sentences that arrived 4 months late, with no return address and no expectation of response. Anger at the timing. Skepticism about what they were worth. The reasonable resistance to releasing someone from a hook they had put themselves on. He felt some of that. But underneath it, something else. 2 sentences written by hand and sent without expecting anything back represented a kind of work that was real even when it was small. Saying I was wrong to a person who can't respond requires something of you. It has to be done for its own sake or not at all. He folded the paper, put it in his jacket pocket. Lorraine watched him. She's... No, he said. Not yet. Maybe not at all. I don't know if that's mine to give. He paused. But I'm not going to pretend it means nothing either. She nodded. She understood exactly what he meant. 3 weeks later, Darnold drove to Clearwater on a Sunday afternoon. He came straight from teaching the morning class, still in his gi, which he had done before when the timing worked out and the nurses had long since stopped commenting on it. His mother was in the common room when he arrived. She was sitting by the window with a book open in her lap that she wasn't reading, watching the bird feeder outside with the complete uncomplicated attention she gave to things that genuinely pleased her. 3 sparrows were conducting what appeared to be a heated negotiation over a particular piece of seed. Darnell came in and sat in the chair beside her. She looked at him. He watched it happen, the way he had learned to watch it over 3 years. The processing, the particular weather moving across her face, the moment when something seek either connected or didn't. Darnell, she said. Just his name. The specific weight and warmth of his name in her voice, which was something that existed nowhere else in the world. Hey, Mama, he said. She looked at him properly then, at the gi, at the black belt, at him. You're wearing it, she said. I'm wearing it, he said. She reached out and put her hand on his arm. Her hands were smaller than he remembered from when he was a child. Age did that, took something from the hands gradually and without announcement. But her grip when she found his arm was steady. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Okay," he said. "I don't always remember things," she said. Her voice was matter-of-fact about it. She had arrived somewhere in the past year at a practical relationship with the forgetting. Noting it without drama the way you note weather. Some days I don't remember yesterday, last week. Sometimes I can't find what I had for breakfast. She paused. "But I remember you." She patted his arm. "I always remember you," she said. Darnell sat with that. He sat there for a long time in the common room of Clearwater Care Home, with the sparrows outside still negotiating and his mother's hand on his arm and the afternoon light coming through the window at the slow, generous angle of late November in Georgia. He didn't need to say anything. She didn't need him to. That was the whole of it, some days. Just being in the room. Just being the person someone remembered. That evening, he drove back to Apex. The academy was dark when he arrived. The last class had ended at 7. The cleaning crew that Price had hired after Darnell moved out of that role had finished and gone. Darnell had a key. He had always had a key. He let himself in through the front door, but this time he didn't turn everything on. Just the main hall lights, low, the way the gym looked when the day's work was done and the space had settled into itself. He walked to the center of the mat, stood there, the championship banners above him, the trophy cases along the front windows catching the low light. His name on the schedule board near the entrance, Instra, DWWEB, Saturday 8 to 10 A. Tuesday, 6 to 8 p.m., which he had read a dozen times now, without feeling like it belonged to someone else. He took a breath, and he began to move. The forms he had spent 2 decades building into his body, carried through 8 years of service and 2 deployments, and a decision made in a storage room at Fort Bragg in November 2016, and 7 years of choosing mop and everything that had come after. He moved slowly at first, not for an audience, not for a camera, not for the proof of anything to anyone, just because his body knew these things, had always known them, and the knowing deserved to breathe. He moved faster. The footwork Price had drilled into him until it stopped being something he did, and became simply the way he moved through space. The economy of motion that comes from understanding that power was never about force. It was about placement, timing. The precise translation of what you intended into what your body actually did. He moved through all of it. Nobody turned on a light. Nobody came through a door. Nobody made him stop or explain himself, or fold it back up and put it away. He moved in the quietude of a gym that had finally become what it should have been for a long time. In a life that had always been his, even when he'd been telling himself it belonged to someone else. In a body that had been waiting, patiently and without complaint, for him to stop being afraid of it. When he finished, he stood in the center of the mat, breathing, steady, hands at his sides. Still. Not the stillness of suppression. Not the stillness of a man making himself smaller than he was. Not the stillness of someone waiting to be told he was allowed. Just still. The way water is still when nothing is disturbing it, when it is simply, completely, entirely itself. Outside, Lanta did what it did every evening and every morning and every moment in between, moving and humming and carrying its millions of lives forward through the ordinary hours, each one with its weight, its cost, its particular story that mattered even when nobody was watching it and nobody was filming it and no hashtag had ever attached itself to it. Inside, in the quiet of a gym on the north side of the city, Darnell Webb stood on the mat and stayed.